I will start with definition. Identity negotiations. That's a process in which a person negotiates with society in large regarding the meaning of his identity, his or hers. Well, these processes of identity negotiation in Mauritius were being performed among all ethnicities, all classes, all religions. All the immigrants had to alter and transform their identities to survive in this new home. Obviously, Europeans were in a more preferable position and they didn't need to go through such turbulent changes and processes of adaptation to this new environment as other incoming groups did. I will be talking mostly about religious adaptation and transformations of slaves and indentured workers, the two groups which underwent the most drastic change. And I would like to start with something that we tend to forget, that Mauritius has no indigenous populations, which means that all people who came to Mauritius, to Ireland, were in fact colonizers. This is something which in terms of historical archaeology is very rare, especially when we compare Indian Ocean or this particular case with American or let's say Atlantic experience. Today, Mauritius is a blend of diverse cultures and religions, and this is how they present themselves. This is the description, the official descriptions of Mauritian population for tourists. Modern Mauritius consists of Hindus, Creole, Chinese, Muslim, and Europeans. I found that very interesting, so I wanted to look more into this. But first, one of the identity markers, as they were defined in sociological sciences, is language. Mauritian Creole is an interesting blend of languages of different groups who came to Mauritius mainly in French period. Slaves could hardly bring any objects with them, but if nothing else, they brought their language. And when this language was incorporated with French of that time, it became the lingua franca of Mauritius. Now, the Creole is based on medieval French language, of course, with a few words of Portuguese or Spanish, probably more of Portuguese, and then other languages of Southeast Africa, for example, Malagasy, Makua, Swahili, and Makonde, and of course it had also a few words of English, but the language itself, the Mauritian Creole, is considered as a heritage, a legacy of colonial, French colonial period. The structure of Creole was appeared to have been fully in place by the time of the beginning of indenture immigration. So, according to the reference that I had, there is no Hindu words in there, although I know from the first hand that they are. In fact, they are. As an archaeologist, I use religion as a tool to study the interactions of different social groups. Religious practice, I believe, it reflects the private ideology that a person consciously puts into practice. They go and buy candle, they buy oil lamp, they have a different diet, and etc. Religion was an important mechanism for social cohesion in this part of the world and in this time that I'm talking about. And in Mauritius, religion is a better way to define social groups beyond ethnicity. class, occupation, language, place of origin, and they all reinforce the confines of ethnicity. And division of labor generally also followed ethnicity. For example, Franco-Mauritians, who owned most of the land on the island and the sugarcane refining factories, were at the top of this social economic pyramid. The Creoles, then having left their work in the sugarcane fields after the abolition of slavery, mainly worked as civil servants or artisans. And then, for example, Sino-Mauritians from China, of course, worked in the retail sector, and they owned most of the small shops in the island, whereas Hindus and Muslims were overrepresented in the agricultural sectors as laborers on these sugarcane fields. Franco-Mauritian spoke French. Creoles and a significant a part of other groups, of other communities, spoke Creole, and parts of mainly rural communities spoke Bhojpuri or other languages depending where they were coming from. Why did I put the sacred buildings in this table? The manner, the mode of building sacred buildings for each religious group is different. For example, churches in Christianity, they follow a demographic profile of the country. So depending on the parish, how many people are there, they build church. Hindu temples, for example, they are built wherever people see the place needs to be remembered, or it has a special energy for them, or is for example, at some crossroads and so on. Mosques have another different social meaning for its religion. And Buddhism, well, the stupas are really hard to study because they're mostly built in the private areas of the houses, and also there's such a small percentage of them, and there's such a bad preservation. It's really hard to get something out of that. Identity through religion. As I said, I will be talking mostly about slavery and indenture. Identity for slaves was most of the time lost, or let's say hidden. Enslaved Africans come from a wide range of parts of Africa, so they lack common culture. Of course, the unwilling recruitment of slaves, plus further breakup of the originally captured or enslaved groups, plus isolation of individuals, further made further possible for them to not to keep up with their identity. And also a lot of slaves were enslaved as children, and they were brought up by the European Christian adults, meaning either their masters or missionaries. And also, for example, their names, they were given new names when they were either Christianized, or when they came to Mauritius, they were given either French or English Christian names, so that they were separated from their African origin. By the middle of the 19th century, Creoles and white population of Mauritius, Franco-Mauritians, shared a common language, religion, and the cultural traits. For example, in this table we see that slavery, the identity of slaves was lost, but from the fifth law of the fifth law of the slave law of Mauritius, we know that slaves were prohibited to have any meetings either day or night outside with any other slave individual. This shows us that they had secret meetings, and the language, of course, is kept in Mauritian Creole. From those secret meetings, for example, music, Seda, was practiced, and for example, in the southern parts of Mauritius, we know that even though the names of descendants of slaves are French, they have a suffix which tells us that their ancestors were slaves. On the other hand, with indentured population, their identity was mostly kept because they migrated in a few generations, migrated together, 2, 3. So the whole family, or even grandmother, grandfather came with them, and the tradition, the religion, was kept within the small nucleus of a family, but also they had baitkas, which are Hindu, let's say, schools, not religious schools, but more clubs for children. Daycare, they talked about disputes and so on. And they had sirdars. Sirdars are these foremen. Usually they were old indentured workers who came back to India and brought new indentured workers with them. They spoke the language of this new group, and also they spoke Creole, so they were an intermediate between sugar estate owner and these indentured workers. For example, for Muslim indentured workers, yamas were also kind of social clubs for Muslims where they were talking, where they had their own meetings. Out of indenture identity, we can see the cuisine is today a very big part of so cuisine is a big part of indentured workers' identity, and also they brought in caste system, which was unknown before. Of course, it's not such rigorous as it's in India, but still it is, and it's mainly used between when people are marrying each other for marriages. When I talk about religion, for slaves, out of the reasons that I just told you, religion was most of the time lost. There is one exception, Longanese. I will talk about that a little bit later. And today, the leftovers of those African religions are also seen in the knowledge of medicinal plants, in witchcraft and superstition. On the other hand, indentured, they had their indentured workers, they had their religions organized. They had their pandit, and pandits and imam, kind of preachers of their religions. They had their organized medical system and so on. So also, for example, when they came to Mauritius, their names were recorded, the photographs were taken, so even with that, their identity was kept. To have the connection with their homeland, different groups, different ethnicity use different modes of adaptation to their new home. Slaves were using Longanese, just a minute, I'll explain everything about that, and indentured workers, I'm talking here about the Hindu group, the Hindu religion, had their Grand Bassin. This is the main Hindu sacred religious location in Mauritius, and it represents part of Ganges, a sacred river from India, a part of Ganges in here, in Mauritius, sorry. The sacred location exists from the end of 19th century, after a Pandit had a dream in his dream he saw Lord Shiva, the legend says. The Lord Shiva was flying with his wife around earth, and then he saw this beautiful paradise island. He landed there, and of course, while traveling around the world, he had sacred water Ganges on his head, and he spilled a drop of water in this volcano crater in Mauritius, and he said, okay, so I spilled that, this is now a part of sacred river Ganges, and I profess that in certain time in future there will be people who live next to the real Ganges, India. They will move here and they will live here happily ever after. For indentured workers, for Hindus, passing the ocean is something that for their religious belief is like a death. They are not pure anymore. So having Ganges in Mauritius meant that they could live as Hindus, and they were further on. They were still their purity as a religious person was kept, or it could be purified again. So that means that living far away from their home was a lot easier with that, and in some cases even possible. So if I turn to Longanese, this is something that's singular to Mauritius. It's a syncretism of African beliefs, and rituals. The magic of Longanese is in its ability to heal sick, to divine the future, and to influence people's character and destiny. Practitioners of Longanese are called Longanese as well, and they're officially unknown, although everybody knows them. This is something that people do not talk about. They don't identify themselves with Longanese, they just use it. It's a kind of a tool. Going too fast. So the practitioners can be men or women. They can do black or white magic, and they use symbols from Christianity and Hinduism. Now, when we say Christianity, you see the picture, the symbol of cross there. It could be taken from Christianity, but on the other hand, cross is known as a symbol of a passage in a lot of different other cultures, religions, not just Christianity. So it might not be used as a symbol from Christianity, but only as a symbol of passage. From Hinduism, we have, for example, oil lamps. They are used at these rituals and these practices, but they're also, as in other, for example, Kali pujas, they used also sacrifices of animals, of vegetable, of their offering food, drinks, and so on. Longanese is used mainly by slaves and was used mainly by slaves and indentured laborers, and today is used by everybody. So all groups of Mauritian population use Longanese for their purposes. How does it work? You come to a secret location, you contact this practitioner before Longanese, you come to a secret location. First, you have to pay to enter the site and to enter this middle world. So you see a lot of money in these locations. Then you offer, of course, these offerings are all done by the practitioner, and you just give all the drinks and the food to this Longanese person. The next thing is that you offer a life. In previous years, for let's say 20, not even 20, we saw offering of a bird 5 years ago here. So they were offering a life. Today, most of the time, you see vegetable lemons that are cut, and there's a red dust representing blood there. so it's alive. There's a lot of candle, red and white, and this sort of things. All these locations are publicly, officially unknown, although everybody knows. But for example, when I was searching for these things and for this location and I was asking people where to, nobody wanted to talk. It was really hard to find a person who could take me to those places. Because of the offerings of the of animals, of the sacrifices, Longanese is illegal in Mauritius, although all the other religions are free and you can be, religion is something that's really open to whichever group you want to belong in Mauritius, but Longanese is illegal, although everybody is using it. The site I was showing you about, it's Le Monde. This is the place where we first encountered, where we came across the Longanese. It's a World Heritage Site of UNESCO. It was enlisted in 2008. It's a symbol, sorry for this, it's a symbol of resistance for slavery, especially this mountain, because there was supposed to be a Maroon-free republic on top. And we were in the buffer zone of World Heritage Site. There is this cemetery, which is supposed to be a Malagasy cemetery. Nobody claims it. We don't know who is buried here. We can find its location in old maps where it's always marked as a cross, although it's not consecrated, it's not Christian. Who was buried here? Probably emancipated slaves. This is not a Christian cemetery also because there's no order. The graves are, I won't say they lie thrown in this area. They have a certain order, but it's not European or what we know from Christianity that cemeteries are like. So I was talking about when I say about the line and the alignment, these graves, especially the last phase, they're all aligned towards the big mountain, towards the Le Mont Brabant, which in this case it's also very good information that this is almost the same alignment towards Madagascar. So if this is Malagasy cemetery, and we know how Malagasy are with the repatriation of their people, it's a really good example how, okay, if you cannot be repatriated, you cannot be buried in your homeland, at least this is, I guess, the closest way that you can be linked to your homeland. Also, what talks about this not being Christian cemetery, Christian burials, are the finds. The finds are, I won't say rich, but they are not poor. They have, all the deceased had buttons from the mother of pearl. There are bottles, there are white clay pipes, there's a I think French pottery found that, even some jewelry. And this is the other, for example, coins under the head from the, let's say, 1830s. So, as I said before, the Longanese we found, this was the place of Longanese, this is the first one that we saw, and this cross here, after a while the crosses get burnt, they get damaged. So this is the third cross that I saw in this location in the last 5-6 years. And some candles. Now, if I tell you something about Hinduism, land use on the island was directing the settling of the migrants, and so indirectly influenced the spread of religion around the island. For example, sugarcane fields. Sugarcane fields were using indentured workers from different parts around the Indian Ocean. indentured workers brought with them, as I explained, their identity, their religion. So we have, this is the case of Trianon. The owner's house is here. This is the famous barracks, which are part of the Mauritian heritage, protected. And this is the temple of Hindu temple. These barracks were the houses of sirdars. So these are the intermediate between the owners and the indentured workers, whose camps were based in here, in between the temple and the barracks. There is 4 types, or let's say, Hinduism in Mauritius can be divided also in 3 other groups. So we have Hindu, and then we have Tamil group, Marathi, and Telugu. It depends from where people came. These are the many variants of Hinduism in Mauritius. So they depend on the location from people who are coming from India. And like I said before, and you will see a quote in Sugar Estate. This is the Sugar Estate Montvoisin. And we have opposite one, left is Tamil temple, and across the street is Telugu temple. Also on Sugar, so these are nice, rich, elaborate temples close to the livings of owner's house. But then also we have the first temple of the first Hindu temple was built in 1867 in Gokula, and it looked something like that. Today it looks like that. What I'm more, let's say, worried about are temples and shrines which were set up in sugarcane fields. Today, because of the mechanization of this production of the sugarcane fields, they are still there, and they're still being frequently visited, but it doesn't mean that they will still there for a long time. They won't be, let's say, renovated as they were before. So this is something that we have to be aware of how to protect. This is a quote from a report of the Royal Commissioners from 1875, stating that there were not only Hindu temples on sugar estates, but also churches and some small mosques as well. The one thing that I wanted to show you is, when you build a Hindu temple, for example, you have to, somewhere else, not in India, you have to bring all the statues of the gods, of the deities, and they were made in India. Now, the first indentured workers, when they were coming, they didn't have they weren't so rich that they would bring the deities with them, the statues. So they set up these first shrines, and they treated it as temples, and they were putting these stones. For example, this is Kalimai and Seven Sisters, and each stone, these are just big pebbles, they represented one of the deities. They were painted in a different way, and they're also wrapped in a cloth. When indentured workers became richer, when they had more money, when they could afford, they built a new temple. And here, for example, you can see a new temple, these nice, rich, elaborate buildings next to this temple, this first shrine. Why didn't they build it on top? For example, churches were built on top of each other. This is something that is very sacred, and it would demand a lot of money and a pundit from India to come and to, let's say, deconsecrate this place. And people didn't have money, or they didn't have the resources to do that, and so they are kept where they are, and people are still praying within this shrine, let's say, or in the new one. When I talk about Hinduism or any other religion in Mauritius, I would like to point out that the festivals are very important. Baharya Puja is a festival, a Hindu harvest ritual still used today. Before the harvest starts, even today in 2013-14, workers who work at that estate, plus managers, plus the owners, at the beginning of the harvest, they meet, they have this puja, these rituals for good harvest. For example, another remark from the report from late 19th century, Bon Année was a pagan festival, and its nature is far more resembling to the Holi festival in India, which is, this one, so with all these colors. But not the problem, but what's interesting about this festival is that Bon Année was celebrated in January as a new year. Bon Année, a new year. And Holi festival is, ritual is now a public festival in Mauritius, which is celebrated in March. And Bon Année doesn't exist anymore. Mahashivaratri, that's the pilgrimage to the Grand Bassin that I showed you before. Also, what I forgot to say before, you saw the Grand Bassin with this big statue of Shiva. That's a 30-meter high statue above the island, above the lake. And rituals in honor of Kali, Kali Mai. Indentured workers coming from India were not usually, but often of a low caste, and these are the workers that are supposed to be bringing this Kali beliefs and rituals to Mauritius. Now, if I talk about Islam just in short, the first record of Islam is from 1722, when a Muslim tradesman asks if he can buy for the freedom of his enslaved wife. The first mosque was built in 1805 after a long period of debating with the government. The Muslim belonged to Sunni, Shiite and Ahmadis group, and today the most important mosque in Mauritius is Juma Mosque here, which this is the picture from 1865, I think, and it's stated here as Indian Mosque. So we as a European, I guess, we connect India with Hinduism, but it's clear here that it's not just that India doesn't cover just Hinduism. The festivals, the Muslim festivals, this is one of the important and very interesting one, is Yamse. This is the festival this is the quote from the same report. It's Muharram festival, but in Mauritius is called Yamse. And even though that Muslims were in minority, it was the only native festival that was generally observed in the island, and when it was performed in the capital, also the government came, the governor of the island came, and a lot of prominent people. Now, after some time, this belongs Hindu festival, and it's moved from the capital to the rural areas, and the government and the prominent people of Mauritian government, they don't come and celebrate this anymore. It's still celebrated today in Mauritius, and this is, let's say, Hindu part of this festival, and this is what's left of the Muslim part. Just shortly, Bois Marchand, we excavated there for the last 3 seasons. It's a cemetery. It was established in 1860s with the malaria epidemics. It's the largest cemetery in Indian Ocean world, and apparently it was the third largest cemetery in the world at that time. Today, let's say, just over half of cemetery is still in use. The cemetery is divided by religions and occupations, and we were excavating here in the part which was marked as plague and indentured laborers, and this is what we found. Clearly, if indentured laborers were poor people, this is not a poor grave. So this question remains open. Also, what is interesting about this record, with this cemetery, it's not protected. It's still in use. There are no records. There were no records. We didn't find anything in the archives anywhere. What we found were the records from the beginning, from the establishment of the cemeteries, let's say from 1861. All the burial books were in two cupboards in this small little house at the entrance of to the cemetery. So all these records, they state the name, the surname, the date of birth, the place of origin, the place of birth of a deceased, their immigration number if it was an immigrant, what they died for, where they died, who paid and how much they paid for the burial. And if we connect this record, the excavation, the information from the excavation, these records, and the records from Mahatma Gandhi Institute, the pictures and the immigration forms that people filled when they were coming to Mauritius, we have this enormous and very important information, how shall I say this, cloud, and we can do so much with this. Just another view from Bois Marchand, and I would like to conclude with a few suggestions for the future. You can see both tangible and intangible diversity of cultural, religious heritage in Mauritius. I think we need to work on preservation of this, plus of the traditional landscape, the places of memory, etc. Now, what is important is that there is no legislation for the protection of cultural heritage of religious buildings or any heritage of religious origin in Mauritius. Diego will tell you a lot more about that, but because this is such a religious is so socially, religiously, ethnically divided, to balance all these things would be political. I don't know, I guess politicians think it would be political murder, so they don't address that at all. There are about 200 protected sites or monuments in Mauritius. None of them is of religious origins, even though there's about 700-800 religious buildings in Mauritius. So why is that? And how can we address this heritage void in the legislative and legislation of heritage protection in Mauritius? I think we are at the right place now here in Stanford with the right people surrounding us to find maybe a solution for this. Thank you.